All right, I'm going to take us into our next question here. This question comes to us from Jason, and he asks, how much does the arrival of CeeDee Lamb affect Michael Gallup's projection? All right, and so I think it's worth saying that CeeDee Lamb, probably the number one dynasty rookie wide receiver in most people's draft this year, doesn't seem to have gotten a very favorable landing spot. Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper both had over 1,000 yards receiving last year. Amari Cooper ended up as the number 7, I think, wide receiver in half-point PPR. But there are some things that are working in CeeDee Lamb's favor this year that I do think will affect Michael Gallup. First of all, the Cowboys did rank 2nd in the NFL. They had almost 300 yards passing per game, and they scored, I think they were 6th in points, about 27 points a game. And while Amari Cooper was his Dak Prescott's favorite wide receiver and had a phenomenal season overall, and while Michael Gallup was an excellent number 2, over 1,000 yards with 6 scores, between weeks 6 to 17, we've talked about this before, Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 35. Okay, so he was not, even this huge chunk of the season, I went back week 6 to 17, he was the wide receiver 35. He was barely a wide receiver 3 for the majority of the season. Now, yes, he got paid $100 million. He is going to have a role there. And as has been discussed this season, this was probably largely due to, or at least it's somewhat due to, injury based. But this has been a consistent thing for Cooper. He blows up, and his consistent inconsistency, right? He blows up and then disappears for half a season. Now, the thing is this. Dallas can cut or trade Cooper in 2022 and absorb about a $6 million hit, all right? And Gallup as well. Sorry. I think Gallup. And Gallup is scheduled to become an unrestricted free agent in 2022 as well. So there's 1 or 2 years here where they're all going to be existing together. And I think in that offense, CeeDee Lamb is going to come in and automatically be the wide receiver 3 from the beginning. And according to PFF, Mike McCarthy in his last season with Green Bay ran 11 personnel. That's 3 wide receivers, 1 back and 1 tight end on 76% of their offensive snaps. That was the second most in the NFL. Now, things might change, but Mike McCarthy's shown a propensity to have 3 wide receivers on the field a lot. In addition to that, CeeDee Lamb often has played out of the slot. He did it in college. And Randall Cobb, who departed this year, also played primarily out of the slot. Last year, Randall Cobb had 55 receptions for 828 and 3. I think that is about the floor you can expect out of CeeDee Lamb this year. And I do think he's going to end up taking, as the season goes on and he develops in rapport with Dak Prescott, I think he's just a better wide receiver than Michael Gallup. That's not to take anything away from Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup's a good wide receiver, but I think he's going to have the opportunity to catch more passes. And I think, while I think Michael Gallup is probably still going to be close to the numbers he has this year, I think you're going to see those decrease a little bit as the season goes on. And I think starting next year, you're going to see CeeDee Lamb probably take on a larger role there. I just thought this was interesting. And I think it's probably worth noting that I read this article by Reed Hansen. He writes for Fansided, but he notes that Lamb was pretty successful inside his last season at Oklahoma. He caught 25 balls from the slot for a whopping 6.11 yards per route run. That was best in college. So while he lined up outside most of the time, he's no stranger to the inside and has a track record of making major damage from the slot position. And I think as they start to see that in CeeDee Lamb, I think he's going to slowly whittle away some of those targets from Michael Gallup. And if Amari Cooper gets injured, I think we're going to see him take a big step forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think the 2 most talented wide receivers in Dallas are actually, in order, CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. And Cooper signed that huge contract, but there is an out. He could be gone in 2021, I believe, for them. So if CeeDee Lamb blows up, and it is what we kind of all thought he was going to be, and he's one of the new great wide receivers in the league, I think it's going to end up being Gallup and Lamb, if for no other reason than pricing. But I think Gallup and Lamb are the ones who probably project to be more consistent. We talked, I mean, like you said it already, like Cooper is seemingly phenomenally talented, but he just can't do it week in and week out. Whether or not that's because of injury or his own consistency problems, it doesn't matter. He's inconsistent for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting, Jordan, that you brought Amari Cooper into this conversation. The question was originally how much will CeeDee Lamb affect Michael Gallup, but Michael Gallup only had 6 less targets over the course of the season last year than Amari Cooper. So like, why aren't we concerned about CeeDee Lamb affecting Amari Cooper in this offense? And they're going to run, I mean, they're the ones that are interchangeable on this offense, not Gallup and Lamb. It's Cooper and Lamb as far as where they line up on the field. So Cobb still had 83 targets last year too. So like, it's not like they're coming into a barren wasteland in this offense either. And I know I just said that, like, I think I liked Blake Jarwin, most of those younger tight ends to break out. But after looking at this question, I mean, all 3 of those wide receivers are so much more talented than Blake Jarwin. Like,
agreed.
Shouldn't they just funnel those tight end targets to those wide receivers? It's not going to happen that they're all going to hit like triple digit targets, but Gallup only had 66 receptions on those 113 targets. So if he can, even if his targets take a little bit of a hit, but he can up his efficiency just because there's more talent on that offense. I like Michael Gallup in redrafts this year. I think he's probably the 3rd wide receiver that you'll draft on this team. I'm betting Cooper and Lamb will go off the board before him. I'm not convinced of Lamb's immediate impact. I think you're right, Jordan. Later in the season, that'll happen. But I think Gallup might wind up being the best return on investment as far as redraft leagues go this year. Lamb is obviously the dynasty stash of the 3, but there's still a lot. You said Gallup and Cooper are both. Technically, Cooper could be off the books by 22. That's when Gallup is slated to test free agency. So Lamb is the only thing that we have like a solid future here on. But for me this year, the value is Gallup because he's proved that he can do it. And if he can up his efficiency, I think he'll still be a wide receiver 3 this year.
And his efficiency is somewhat affected by the fact that he's more actively the deep threat on that team, that team as well. He was that close to having like 250 more yards and 3 more touchdowns on big plays where him and Dak just weren't quite on the same page yet. And in theory, that will come with more time and a more developed rapport.